Essentially, today's talk is about tackling graft in India. And our speaker will shed light on the state of corruption in the nation at high levels of office and how an individual can fight institutionalized corruption. Dr. Swamy is quite expert in this area, having famously fought and won landmark cases that exposed abuse of power in India, including the telecom spectrum case, which was one of the largest corruption scandals in India that results in the imprisonment of a government minister for taking bribes. Dr. Swamy is also currently prosecuting a case against Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi for breach of trust and illegally amassing millions in a property dispute involving the now defunct newspaper, the National Herald. Apparently, the next hearing is on the 14th of December. Aside from being a career public servant, our speaker is also a renowned economist, having taught at Harvard University for around 20 years. Dr. Swamy has a lot of public support for his efforts, also evident from the 3.32 million Twitter followers he has to date. That's impressive. Everyone give a warm welcome to Dr. Swamy.
Corruption affects corruption, particularly by people in high places, affects our society in a number of ways. Some of them I'll enumerate. First of all, it induces the production of substandard products. For example, if you are building a road and a tender is put out and it is given to somebody on corruption, then in order to recover his money, the builder or the road layer would use substandard products, and that road wouldn't last very long. And this caused enormous inconvenience to the public, but of course, for the public person who enabled it and the man who got the contract, there's always the next year when the road has to be repaired and rebuilt. Similarly, adulteration of products. This is possible because by corruption you can ensure that there is no prosecution of anybody. When the corruption takes place, it's done mostly on cash. And that cash cannot be used for building factories or assets which are visible. And they end up in property deals and building of palatial mansions. And this, or using of modern facilities like air conditioners and large LCD televisions, etc. And as a consequence, the investment priority in the country gets distorted because these property consumer durables, which are of luxurious quality and such like, they earn a higher rate of return on investment. And so we find by a calculation that directly and indirectly in India, 70% of our investment is going to support such non-essential, as we sometimes call it, economic activities. And the common man who needs many of the things like ordinary shoes and ability to afford to travel by public transport, so on, there's not sufficient investments. Schools suffer in rural areas. And all this is because the people who can invest want a high rate of return, and these are the industries where get a high rate of return. Then the third thing is, since it is done by cash, and the government have made a mistake, I hope they'll rectify it soon, to permit forward trading in agricultural commodities. Very few countries of the world have that, and India, for some reason, not in our government, but the previous government. They introduced forward trading. And farmers don't have checks, don't accept checks and so on. So when they come to the wholesale market, they want cash, and cash is available from corrupt activities. And so we find many corrupt people now buying agricultural products in the harvest time in these wholesale markets, and then putting them in storages, cold storages, causing an artificial shortage, and thereby spiking the agricultural prices. Even if then we have abundance of production in agriculture, which is assisted by a good monsoon rain, we find that agriculture prices keep going up and down. And this is another major impact which is having in our society. There are also other ways where our system is getting destabilized. They corrupt money, or the cash, is sent out abroad through the Hawala racket and returns back to India in the name of some financial derivative which I think no country in the world has invented, but the fertile mind of the Indian has. It's called participatory note. And these are issued by Morgan Stanley, then US Fidelity Investments, and Goldman Sachs. And with that, you can come, no questions are asked. In fact, the participatory note has no name, no date, nothing except the amount that you put in, and all you need to do is show your passport, and your Indian passport, and you would get it abroad, and then you bring it back to India, and you are free to invest it in the stock market. So in the recent years, this rise in foreign investment is largely due to what is called as portfolio investment. And that portfolio investment is something that can go in and come out at any time. And this causes a great deal of instability in the prices stock market prices. And this is another effect of black money. Finally, since most of the top politicians in the country keep their money abroad illegally, they use the Hawala route via Dubai to have it deposited in countries like Switzerland, Cayman Island, Virgin Islands, etc. And in Dubai, one of the most notorious gangsters from India resides. This is Dawood Ibrahim. The Pakistan Intelligence Service also is placed there. And they are able to get to know the names of these politicians and which bank account they are depositing their money, because it is done by internet transfer. And the Hawala agents cannot function in Dubai unless they comply and cooperate with these gangster forces plus the intelligence service of Pakistan. So I find, I will not name them, but many politicians are now pro-Pakistan in their attitudes, largely because of fear of exposure. Now this has been this is the documented thing as far as we are concerned in India, and this is something which is very dangerous. So national interest gets compromised in this process. So we have a situation where fighting corruption is like fighting cancer in the body. It's a slow debilitation that is taking place in our country, and something had to be done. In 2014, this was one of the major planks. This major plank helped us to win the election. There were other planks also, Narendra Modi's, the present Prime Minister's own personality. And there was also, for the first time, a identity issue which was silently campaigned for, by which the large 80% population of Hindus buried their caste differences, regional differences, language differences, and not all of them, but a good section decided to vote for our party. And as a consequence, we gained 10% points in our vote, which we would not have had the old divisions that characterized Indian elections had remained. So these three things put together, we got a majority, but corruption was an extremely important part. And in that, I certainly had a major role to play because of the 2G spectrum scam. The 2G spectrum scam was simply this, that the government of India decided to sell spectrum to Indian companies at 1/10 the price it prevailed 10 years ago. And there was no auction. It was what is called as a first come, first served basis. So 9 people, very important people, had no problem being coming early to get their license. There were 450 applicants, but 9 got it. And all 9 were present in the minister's room when the allocation started. So they all got it because they knew the minister. So this first come, first served policy, I argued in court, is against public interest because spectrum is public property. Whatever is the airwaves in the sky, it is not a personal property to be traded, but it's something where its public interest is there, and so public interest requires that the best price be obtained for the society. And therefore, auction is the only way by which this could be done. Now, all these 9 people who got the license for 1/10 the market price, they decided to offload their spectrum to foreign companies. So somebody gave it to Etisalat at 8 times the price he paid the government of India. And the Tatas sold to half their spectrum to Docomo of Japan for 13 times the price he paid to the government of India. Like that, or someone, I think one company sold it to Telenor. So another company sold to a Russian company. So all these 9 companies either completely sold the shares, rather they gave the spectrum wholly or partly to foreign companies, which found it also profitable to get it. Now there was a bar that if you got the spectrum, you can't sell it for 2 years. But the then finance minister came up with a devious proposal that you can't sell the spectrum, that's true, but you can sell the company. So with it, if the shares or if the spectrum also goes, that's okay. And that's what happened. And so all these points I argued in the court. And for the first time, the court said policy decisions of government, if they affect public interest, the court can interfere. And the court interfered, cancelled all the licenses, even though most of the operations were already in full swing, and arrested the Minister for Telecom, directed the arrest of, and the trial has begun where a lot of big industrialists are involved, and several politicians are also there. And I'm expecting sometime next March to see them all convicted and sent to jail, judging by the progress of the court. So this was a landmark which completely shattered the credibility of the Congress party and helped us to win the election. The Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, was a nice, decent person, but he felt that discretion is the better part of valor, and he kept silent most of the time. The money, of course, went to Ms. Sonia Gandhi, but there was no way to prove that. Unless somebody cracks up after he's convicted, then there can be a case launched against her. But in the meantime, I found an interesting secret operation which a mole in the Congress party informed me of, that the National Herald newspaper has been closed down. That is, it was run by a company called Associated Journals. The National Herald Company, as it is popularly called, was closed down. And it was closed down because it had 90 crore rupees, that's around 900 million rupees, in debt to Congress party, which they couldn't pay. Now, why would the Congress party give such loans? That's because when it was started, there was only one party in the country, and it was called the Congress Party, and that was during 1937. And after independence, most of the people who bought the initial shares went to different parties, and because Congress Party was considered a party of the freedom movement, and where everybody joined. But after independence, it became a political party, but the control remained with National Herald. Now, the trick was that Sonia Gandhi and her son created a private limited company. And in that, their share ownership was about 80%. So in a sense, they owned the company. And they had the other well-known politicians of Congress Party, like Motilal Vora, Oscar Fernandez, and two others, as directors, but they had very small, the remaining 20% was distributed amongst them. Now, this party, this company, authorizes one of the directors, namely Mr. Motilal Vora, to negotiate with the Congress Party that this National Herald Company cannot repay your loan. So you assign that loan to us, and we will give you 50 lakh rupees, that is 5 million rupees, as compensation for this gesture. So Mr. Motilal Nehru was asked to go and talk to the Congress treasurer, who also happened to be Motilal Vora. So Motilal Vora went and spoke to Motilal Vora to say that you can't recover this 90 crores or 900 million, so you assign it to us. So it was assigned for 50 lakh rupees. Now it's another story that this company started by Sonia Gandhi and her son. The total authorized capital was only 5 lakhs, that is 500,000 rupees. How they could afford to give them 5 million rupees, that's part of the trial. But it was not necessary for me to reach the prima facie stage. So now, having got this assigned, then Mr. Motilal Vora went with this assignment letter to the National Herald Company and spoke to the chairman of the National Herald Company, chairman of the board of directors, who also happened to be Motilal Vora. So Motilal Vora spoke to Motilal Vora of National Herald and said that, see, you cannot discharge your 90 lakhs, 90 crores. Therefore, you give us 9 crore shares at 10 rupees a share. So that will cover your debt. Of course, they never thought they'll ever be questioned, so there was no board of directors meeting. There was no shareholders meeting. There was no offering shares to existing shareholders, nothing. And that 90 crores was assigned to, was sold in lieu of that debt to this young Indian company owned by Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi. The audaciousness of this is incredible. Now, first of all, National Herald Company had assets worth 20 million rupees with prime property in all the major cities. There was no question of their not discharging this debt. So I would, making a short of it, this was the kind of corruption that was taking place where every aspect of our society was being corrupted. And because they were not being caught, it just filtered down to this. So it's my theory that unless you catch the people at the top, you cannot create the necessary fear factor in people at the bottom, that if they can be caught, I too can be caught. It's no use catching policemen and postmen and so on. That's not going to create the necessary climate for corruption. So I went and filed a case in court while Sonia Gandhi and her party was in power. It's not my government which has enabled me to do it. And argued, and I must say, I'm quite proud to say, that we have a lot of corrupt people in India, but we also have a lot of honest people in India. And this lady judge was fresh in appointment. And she took, of course, 1.5 years of questioning me on this, asking me to produce this document, that document. And finally she ruled that they were prima facie guilty and they should be summoned and arrested. And then if they were to be given bail, they would be given bail. And that order was passed. Against that order, they went to the High Court. It took a year there. I won there also. And then I went to the Supreme Court. They went to the Supreme Court. I won there, and the Supreme Court directed them to appear. And a historic scene was created in India when Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, and those other directors had to come and stand in the dock and then be formally arrested. And then they had to supply a bond, and then a surety, that is who will stand and take the responsibility in case they run away. And they were set out in bail. Since then, I have been seeking the original documents which I am entitled to under Indian law. And by the way, this Indian law was originally framed by the British. There are some good things the British did. And it's pretty comprehensive, and there's plenty of room for an individual to do these things if he has the nerve to do it. So I'm waiting for these original documents because, according to me, there were no 50 lakhs given at all. So I want the Congress party accounts to show me where you got it. Two, that the 90 crores loan claimed to be from the Congress party. There's no record of it, according to my informed sources, and now I want documentation. Informed sources has ever been shown in the balance sheet of the National Herald. I think they must have given it in black money and thought no one will never come a question, there will be question. Now, I want to say, before my time is up, that essentially the core of fighting corruption is based on one mathematical principle or a statistical principle, and that is that if my expectation of a reward from bribe is positive, then I will commit the act of bribery or corruption. And if the expectation is negative, then I will not do it. I don't need police to tell me this. I don't need courts to tell me this. I don't need anybody to tell me. I myself, out of rationality, will not do it. That is, if you get a bribe, that's a certain amount. If you get caught, you lose a certain amount. You lose the entire amount, you lose your property, maybe you lose your reputation. All these are quantifiable. So there is a probability that you will not be caught. And by just subtracting it from 1, there is the probability that you will be caught. So a weighted average of probability of not being caught multiplied by the amount of the bribe plus the probability of being caught and the minus of losing, this weighted average is, in my opinion, the driving force of honesty versus corruption. And therefore, we have to see how if the probability of being caught is small, as it's there in most third world countries, how can we design punishment which is so heavy that despite the probability being small, you still feel disincentivized from going ahead? You think that is not worth the risk, however small, because of the loss that you would suffer. So I would say in India, even today, people are ashamed to be called corrupt. It's not a society where corruption is accepted openly. All corrupt politicians say they are honest, they are so simple, that they are like like Mr. Mahatma Gandhi, who just walked around with a loincloth around him, that we have nothing of our own. This is a standard refrain of all politicians. But because of this value system, if we do put into place a situation where we can rectify corruption, we can do it. There are many ways of doing it. When I came in here, everybody asked me about the demonetization. We had discussed this before the election, and according to me, it was supposed to be as a package, not just an announcement of demonetization. But somewhere the government in its deliberation changed its mind. Second thing I feel that we have erred in is that the finance ministry ought to have, from the last 2.5 years we were in office, prepared a contingency plan that if we do demonetize, then how do we ensure that the ordinary people, particularly in far-flung areas, be provided the alternative clean money for what they have in 300, 500 rupee notes and 1,000 rupee notes. I was told when I was here by one of your members that the freight moving system in India is now coming to a halt because it requires a truck traveling from some long distance at least 45,000 rupees to pay for what they call as octroi or toll taxes. And where is he going to get that 45,000 rupees in cash, which is legal? That is, he will have to get in 100 rupee notes as of now. So there is no telling that if this kind of situation continues, we may have a shutdown. And I'm happy to see the urgency in the Prime Minister's thinking, and he has now decided that every 2 hours he's going to monitor through the Prime Minister's office this, and I'm sure that will come out of it. One thing we have definitely gained, and I think it's worth all the misery that we have imposed, and that is we have knocked out the counterfeit rupee printing by Pakistan as an option for now the terrorists. Earlier on, the Pakistanis had some advantage. I can only guess, I'm not making a assertion, that the counterfeit notes they produced was so akin to our legal currency that it was difficult to tell it apart. And the reason was that the currency paper was the same. Now, how did the Pakistanis get that currency paper? Well, we get our currency paper by a contract with a British company called De La Rue. And that same company also produces currency paper for Pakistan. So it was an error on our part to have, it was not done by our government, it was done by the previous government. It was an error on our part to have continued with that contract. Because while I have no proof that the De La Rue company sold them our currency paper, but the fact is that the similarity is striking, and it's something that has facilitated Pakistan to create this kind of counterfeit note. As a consequence, all demonstrations in Kashmir have stopped. We haven't done anything new to pacify the people there. These young people who used to come, young boys who used to come, they are no more coming. And there are long queues outside the ATMs in Kashmir, who are ordinary people going and trying to convert their 500 rupee note and 1,000 rupee notes. And this only proves to us that the agitation was being financed by Pakistan. So there we have had a major gain. And it's a very big plus. But I wish we had set up kiosks in practically every corner of a city, in the rural areas, and so on. And that could have been done by contingency planning. Even today, the finance minister says that it will take him 3 weeks to modify the existing ATMs to provide for the new 2,000 rupee notes that we are issuing. Now, if you wanted 3 weeks, it should have been done earlier, not after the announcement. So maybe we are learning by doing, as they say. But the fact of the matter is that this is the thing that we have to do. There are other things we have to do. I will deal with the other in the question time. If somebody wants to know that tomorrow, if we want to get the money that's abroad, and that's almost $1 trillion. If you want to get it about how to do it, and what is the best way to bring it back to India, because that's the bigger share of participatory, of the corrupt money that is abroad. And therefore, I think India wants it, because I don't think for all the reportage of demonstrations, there is a equally big proportion which says we are willing to suffer this, provided it ends soon. So if in the next 2 weeks we are able to ensure that anybody who wants to change his now obsolete rupee, 500 rupee or 1,000 rupee note is able to get the new legitimate currency, I think the entire protest will disappear and there will be celebration in India. Thank you very much.
Could you comment, please, on the extent of corruption within the judiciary itself, particularly amongst the judges, because I've heard some stories, there may be some.
Well, if you are saying that are there corrupt judges, yes, they are. But in a case which has attracted public attention and media attention, will that corrupt judge be corrupt? My experience is no. So, of all our decisions of the courts, what proportion do you think might have been bought or influenced? I would say it would be not more than 20%. In the level of the Supreme Court, it's very difficult to say that even one judge is corrupt. He might have a political inclination, and he might, but on the other hand, the judge who ordered Sonia Gandhi to go and face the trial was known to be a very close friend of the Congress party. And I appeared alone. I don't keep lawyers because I don't trust them, although my wife is a lawyer. But they brought in 7 senior-most lawyers. And the judge who's now going to be the Chief Justice of India very soon in January, he, a Sikh gentleman, and everyone was expecting that he will give some relief, but he did not. And I think this public mood, this social media, this focus on television, all these are now a kind of cushion for us to pursue corruption very seriously. So I would say, compared to countries in our neighborhood, we are far more honest and clean than one could expect.
And I understand that you are quite involved in the Tata Air Asia
yes, of course.
controversy.
That's another corrupt thing.
Yes. I would like to hear your views on
I'll tell you.
especially the High Court.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, one of the saddest part of our recent corrupt history is a household name known for extraordinary honesty. The House of Tatas has now been sullied with corruption. And there's a battle royal going on just now. I hope the sacked chairman, who is supposed to be a very honest, upright person, is restored to his position. But this deal that he's referring to are two deals which the government of India permitted. And that is a deal between AirAsia Malaysia and two individuals, Mr. Ratan Tata and one NRI based in London who is now disappeared after selling his shares to Mr. Tata. And the other one was for Singapore Airlines, which had only with Mr. Tata. So two airlines, that is both AirAsia as well as Singapore Airlines, created a joint venture with Mr. Tata to create an Indian-based airline which could fly within the country. Now the problem was that till 2012, we did not allow any foreign direct investment in the Indian domestic airline industry. In 2012, because of the economic factors, etc., that were quoted, the government of India, the cabinet of that government of that time, decided that foreign airlines can invest up to 49% of the shares in existing Indian airlines, which are in dire need of money. Now, AirAsia as well as Singapore Airlines have not invested in any existing airline. Mr. Tata is not an existing airline. He is an individual. And this individual cannot qualify under the liberalization done by the cabinet, and therefore it was illegal. I raised it with the then previous government. It was also done by the previous government. And they didn't listen, so I went to court. And in court, I have come pretty far. The next hearing is also in December, on the 12th of December, and looks like it's going to be a final hearing. In the meantime, we have, out of this scandal that has erupted in the Tata board, we have found that there is a forensic audit report which shows that Mr. Tata bribed some individuals to ensure that this deal goes through. So that document we have got. In fact, I filed a production of document petition in the High Court, and the High Court has issued notice to Tatas to submit it. And I'm 100% certain that both these joint ventures will be struck down, as was in the case of the 2G's spectrum license, and say that under the existing laws, it cannot be permitted. These two airlines have actually cut into our domestic airlines, and some of them have suffered because of the competition. And therefore, even in terms of the need, there was no question about it at all.
The demonetization is a one-time step which perhaps deals with the black money in India at this point in time. So firstly, how do we prevent the buildup of black money again, especially in light of a 2,000 rupee note certainly helping with that?
Yes.
And second, of course, is the question which you asked yourself about how do we bring the black money which is abroad, which far dwarfs the money in India?
Well, I'll answer both questions. The first one is that unless you create incentives not to create black money, these measures have no long-term effect. What are those measures? I would say that the first thing Indians need to feel that they don't have to cheat is the abolition of income tax. And the abolition of income tax I particularly recommend because the total revenue from it is less than the revenue you get from one auction of the 2G spectrum. 2G spectrum. After 2G, we will have auctions of 3G next year and then 4G. So at least for our term, we will have no problem of filling in the gap. I also believe that if you abolish income tax, the rate of savings will go up. And as a consequence, the investment will go up and growth will go up, and through indirect taxes, we will be able to get the revenue that we lose by abolishing income tax. And that's in America called Laffer curve or something like that. Now, these are the kind of measures. I would also like to see that indirect taxes of all the commodities, if you rank them by the revenue they give in indirect taxes, the first 21 give you 90% of the revenue. In my opinion, all the remaining, in thousands all the excise tax from those should be removed. So when there is transparency and simplicity, I don't think that our people would like to be corrupt. It's only the feeling that there's no other way to get what you want. Otherwise, somebody who's a crook will get it. If you are a striving industrialist or a young professional, you think, you see, this is the only way to do it. There's no other way. The people surrender. But nobody is happy to the extent that I've met, except a few, who want to be known as corrupt people or have done corruption. So this is one aspect. The second thing about bringing money back from abroad, there are 4 known ways. One is the way of having bilateral agreements. For instance, in Switzerland, we have a mutual assistance pact, but then we have to specify the details of the account and who owns it, and have a case registered within India. Now that's a painful process. The second one is the way the Germans and the French did. When Chancellor Merkel found that Liechtenstein Bank had many German officials having accounts, she asked the government of Liechtenstein to give her the list, and they declined it, saying, no, this is our business and we'll be finished. So secrecy is important, and they declined. So the German government then bribed the senior-most official of the Liechtenstein Bank. They gave him $500 million, a US citizenship and passport, and plastic surgery to change his face. And he's now living happily in the United States with a new identity. And he gave the entire, he downloaded the whole thing, so even Indian names in it have come out, and the Germans have, after the Supreme Court directed the Indian government to get these names, those names have arrived. They are still in a sealed envelope. It will come out. The French repeated this with Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, and they gave us 800 names. The Germans gave us only 24 names, but Liechtenstein is also a small country. But the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank in Geneva, they gave us 887 names. And that is, it's not been prosecuted vigorously, I'm sorry to say, but certainly, given the new mood of the Prime Minister, this will be also pursued. Then the third way is the American way. When they found that the Americans had bank accounts in Credit Suisse and Union Bank of Switzerland, they arrested the branch officials in Washington. And the next day, the Swiss people said, whatever you want, we are ready to do. Please free them. And the entire list of names were provided to the Americans. And the fourth way, which is a legalistic way, and that is the 2005 United Nations resolution, which says that if a country, I mean, this is the legal interpretation, and I'm going to try it this Parliament session. It says that if a country passes a law saying that in the secret banking countries, which is about 70 in number, all accounts of Indian citizens is hereby nationalized, the United Nations will assist you to get all these accounts credited to India. It's a process, so we have to pass that law. And it can be done, you don't have a parliament vote and all, you can have an ordinance and then later on pass it through parliament. This is something which has attracted the Prime Minister's attention when I spoke to him. I'm expecting that this will really do. And it may take about a couple of years because there will be a lot of litigation and so on. We will have a proviso that if any of the bank holders say that they had, or prove that they have opened these accounts legally and the money there was accountable, then those accounts would be returned. Otherwise, all these other accounts can be brought in. And so these are the 4 ways in which it can be done.
I would like to understand the roots of corruption a bit better. If you look at China, people always say China is so corrupt because they don't have a system of checks and balances. It's just one party that organizes its own anti-corruption campaign. So mainstream opinion is if China had a free press and if China had a truly independent judiciary, corruption would be much less. Now, India has had both since inception, since you became independent, and yet, obviously, it's, I don't know whether it's as corrupt as China or less, but similar probably. Why do those checks and balances not work?
Good question.
Well, you said free press and an independent judiciary. And I think the judiciary has evolved quite a bit. I could say, by and large, it's independent. But media is also become corrupt. Although recently the government decided to issue a one-day ban on a prominent TV station called NDTV, I'm separately prosecuting them on the Air Asia matter because they got a bribe in that. And there's a money laundering case already registered against them. So we need our media also to be independent, but I don't agree that our corruption is more than China or as much as China. In China, you get caught only if you're against the party there, ruling party. In India, I think the process of people getting caught has started and it's going to continue. And I agree with your general proposition that if a country has a independent free press and an independent judiciary, then that country is unlikely to have any significant corruption.
Thank you very much for a very insightful talk. A token of our appreciation,